Like most women working and female dentists, I think mom guilt is real. Like probably have a moment of mom guilt every day. But my 11-year-old now, anytime he writes something like something at school or a story and it has to do with his family, he always will say, my mom works so hard. It gets me choked up, but that's what I'm teaching him, hard work. He'll never be one of those old men saying that women can't do something.
Well, hey guys, welcome to the 5th episode of the Story Project podcast. Each guest I've interviewed so far has truly blown me away with their story, vulnerability, and resilience. And today I'm so excited to introduce to you my guest, Dr. Holly Baller.
Hi.
I'm so happy to have you here. I know you're busy. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
Yes, I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, I always like to start from where we met. And if I remember correctly, it was 2019. I think the first time I met you was at the Delivering Wow conference in Jamaica.
Yeah. Oh, that was so much fun.
It was so much fun. And I was just thinking about this when I was prepping for this interview, and I was like, why are we not there right now?
Right? It's about that time too.
Yeah. Yeah. So we had a lot of fun connecting with you there, and yeah, just got to know you and your story a little bit and talked about all things being, you're a mama of 3 boys and you are a specialist and your journey towards practice ownership, which we'll get into later. But yeah, it was super fun to meet you there for sure. And
Yes.
Before we get into like what I like to call the real parts of the interview or the in-depth stuff, I always like to have a little fun, like an icebreaker, and ask you some questions and just let our audience get to know you. So tell us where you grew up and where do you live now?
Well, I grew up in New York, in upstate New York. And now I live in just outside of Denver, Colorado. So quite a change. It's much colder in New York than it is here in Colorado, even though everyone thinks Colorado is like freezing. It's not.
Yeah. Well, the one thing about Colorado is the sunshine is incredible there.
I mean, you can there's been days where you can have snow and then swim the next day. It's just insane.
Yeah.
So it's just, the snow melts so fast. It's not like the East Coast where it's there for like 6 months out of the year.
Yeah.
So you can't get better weather.
I'm in Ohio, so I hear you loud and clear.
Yes, yes.
Is Colorado known as, is it nicknamed the Sunshine State? Is that right?
No, Florida is, but I always say Colorado should be, because it rains more and there's more gray days in Florida. There's definitely, it's sunny all the time. Yeah. Like I had an interview in New York. I had an interview at NYU Dental and at Buffalo. And I turned the Buffalo one down. I was like, I don't think my husband's in need of Colorado. And I was like, he's not going to be able to deal with that. Like there's a lot of like gray, dark days and I don't want to go back. So yeah.
I actually, coming from Columbus, Ohio, I completely can relate to the states that are dark and gray and just overcast most of the year. And then usually late spring, the rain will somewhat stop, and then summers are really pretty here. They just get very hot. But on the whole, I think people typically deal with more seasonal depression when they're living in states that are very kind of colder and gray. Mm-hmm. So yeah. For sure. All right. Well, I'm excited to just jump into this conversation with you. And I want to hear just let's back up before we get into practice ownership. How did you get into dentistry? Who inspired you? How did this whole journey begin for you?
Well, I actually wanted to be a lawyer originally. And I was working as a ortho assistant, kind of right out of high school. And I just really loved it. And I love like making things with my hands. My family's in the furniture industry. I've made some pieces of my own furniture. And so I really love putting things together. And I'm kind of like your OCD perfectionist, typical dentist. And I just really loved the ortho part. And so going to dental school, I really wanted to specialize, but I would always shadow the ortho departments. And because I worked so many years in orthodontics, I was like, and I loved like veneers and a lot of cosmetic things with dentistry, that I decided not to specialize. But I worked 17 years in ortho total. So I was trained by an amazing orthodontist here locally. And right out of dental school, I worked for just at his new startup location for a year. So I didn't even do dentistry right out of dental school. I just did ortho. And most people, that's the last thing that they would feel comfortable doing. And that was like the one thing I really felt comfortable doing was orthodontics. And but I really got into airway and myofunction with orthodontics. So, which they're not even really teaching in orthodontic residencies yet, at least not when I graduated. So I already had such a vast background with orthodontics, and the things I was really interested, they're not even teaching. So I decided just to do dental, and then I did a ton of continuing education, and I also love aspects of dentistry. So I think that I have, the best of all worlds. So I can still do the things I love dentally, do orthodontics still. That's, a paradigm shift in orthodontics, I feel like. And so I'm happy that I did not specialize.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, so you have spent, just talking with you over the past few years, you definitely have spent years, on this journey. And as far as like towards practice ownership, and whether you continue to work with, where you are, or move on, and get out on your own. And it's official. You officially opened your doors to Baller and Dental Orthodontics. And it looks like December 2020. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
A few months ago. Yeah.
Well, first, congratulations are in
Thank
order.
you.
That's very exciting. And I love the name too. I love that you named it and has your name right in there. And it's very clear that you do ortho and dental. So I like that as well in the name. I think that's very smart branding.
Yes, I got an awesome last name from my hubby. So, and I just feel like it's more personal. Like there's so many corporate dentists popping up, and I think that I think it's a good shift right now. People are kind of going back to using their last names. And I think that sets me apart from being in an area with so many corporate dentists. So I hope that lends itself to my branding and the personalized care that you get at my office. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what made you, I don't know if this is really the right question, what made you want to have your own practice or start your own practice? And I know that that is a complicated question because there's a lot here. So dive in and kind of, give us the cliff notes of what your past, few years have been like.
Well, I knew while I was in dental school that I wanted to open my own practice. I grew up around entrepreneurs. So, not owning my own practice was never like an option in the back of my head. But I knew that I wanted to gain some experience and do continuing education and do the things that would propel me and just launch the best success for me owning my own practice. And so I knew I didn't want to do it straight out of school, but I was always kind of looking since then. And I never really wanted to do a startup practice. I always wanted to just buy a practice. And, but I did entertain it initially. I was looking at spaces, and I always would end up being next door to an orthodontist who had exclusivity, which has followed me and plagued me for years. But I wanted, so then when I started I have a unicorn associateship that I did ortho for a year. And then the last 4 years I've been at an amazing practice, super, super busy. And really, he gave me the autonomy to do whatever, I wanted. And he was there for mentorship when he needed me. And I didn't work with, there's 3 docs there. I worked by myself. I was too busy to be on other people's days. So I kind of worked on my own, but he was there, if I needed him to come in. So it was wonderful in that regard, but he already had ortho in the practice. So I just landed like the stars aligned, and he was just getting into myofunction, which I already knew. So it was mutually beneficial honestly, because I helped him, he helped me, and he was already doing ortho. So there's not very many practices like that. And it was a super busy practice. So because I was so busy, that really pushed me into definitely not wanting to do a startup and wanting to jump right into a busy practice. And I know people are like, oh, well, you can, create your own culture and all that. But I was under the mindset, why can't you create culture in another practice? I saw that as an associate. I was slowly shifting the culture on the days that I was there, and it, was switched to running it how I wanted to run it. And I was like, we can buy a practice and switch culture. Like, culture is not set in stone. People are changing their culture all the time and growing and changing. And so I was like, oh, I'll just buy a practice. Like it's easy. And honestly, it was quite a feat. I feel like a lot of old school dentists sometimes don't want to sell to female docs. And just the last practice I went to, he told me, and my husband was here with me, and he said, when my wife was your age and she had 3 young children, there's no way she could have owned her own practice. And that was the last time I invited my husband to come with me, because I'm like, if he hears this again, he's gonna freak out. So so it's just disheartening. And the whole process too, with some of these older docs, I don't want to stereotype everyone, but I felt like majority of the docs were like this. I really had to walk a fine line, and I had to let them know that I was productive enough to handle their practice, because they never thought, oh, you're not going to be able to do, the production that I do, when really I was doing quadruple what most of these practices were doing. But I had to walk this fine line, and not letting them know how productive I've been as a dentist, but still letting them know I was productive enough. So I felt like I could never really be myself. And because, I felt like it would bruise their egos a little bit. And so that was always an interesting balance that I was trying to maintain when meeting these older docs. So I feel like there's a lot of discrimination.
Wow, I can't believe that guy. So he spoke that out loud to you.
You said it
in front of your husband.
Yeah. In front of a female broker, nonetheless, too, for the practice. And I think everyone's jaws were on the floor. But yeah, and that's just one story of many. And it's just, and then I ended up looking at practices. I was because I really wanted a big practice, and I was always up against the DSOs, because with the banks, you have to prove how much production you can do. And with these bigger practices, I could do that. And then the DSOs didn't have to, they could just pay cash. So I was always up against DSOs in purchasing these larger practices, and they could always, afford to pay way more than what banks would lend me. So I finally found a practice that I was going to buy. And the doctor he was so excited about all the dentistry I was doing. And he's an older guy. He was in his 70s, and him and his wife owned the practice together, although she lived out of state. So she wasn't practicing there, but he was like super supportive. His ego was not bruised. Like, he was just amazing. And the orthodontist that owned the building there did not want me to sign a lease there, because he didn't want the competition. And he said that he heard about me. And so I signed a lease like a mile down the road. I was just going to move that practice. And then, so I signed a lease here. They told me there was no ortho exclusivity. Everything was good to go.
And you're in, just for context, this is a medical building with multiple.
It is. So it's in the middle of a mall.
Okay.
And there's just one floor of medical suites out of the whole mall.
Okay.
So a little different setup, I think, than most.
Yeah.
But, and so I was going to be the 8th dentist. I was going to take over an existing space that was built out for a dentist, and, confirmed there was no ortho exclusivity, signed my lease. And then a week before I was supposed to close on the other practice, it fell through. And I already had this lease signed. So I had like 4 weeks to prepare for a startup, which during a pandemic. And so, the cards were already a little stacked against me, but, I was excited, up for the challenge. It's a mile from my house. I love this area, lots of friends right here. So I was just focusing on the positive and just getting as much done as I could. And then like a month into my lease, we find out that the orthodontist does have ortho exclusivity. So just been in some issues with that, which we're trying to iron out right now. But
how do you think such a massive miscommunication, how does that even happen? How in the world do they not communicate that to you?
And I asked multiple times to confirm that there was no ortho exclusivity. And they said, no, no, no. What happened was, which one of the brokers told me, oh, well, he signed his lease with the previous owner. And I was like, well, that's not my problem. I asked you straight out, like, you should have checked everyone's lease just to make sure. And, it's not there's nothing in my lease that prevents me from doing orthodontics or anything else for that matter. So this is really between them, but they're thinking that it'll be easier to kind of bully me into changing my lease, to appease the orthodontist, which that's part of my practice. I'm not going to do that. So it's been a little bit of a struggle, but we're going to get through. And so I recommend everyone get everything in writing and lay all your cards out and have an amazing lawyer, because most people don't run into issues with their leases, but when you do, you want your lease to be solid. Mm-hmm. And so it's a learning lesson. But
wow. Well, that's an uphill battle for sure. Yeah. I've always admired this about you, your resilience, determination, how you've always, set goals throughout your life, and then you just push through whatever's in your way to conquer and meet them. Where does that come from in you? Is that just, were you like that, when you were younger, or is that just in your DNA? Is that a skill you've learned?
Well, my dad told me when I was little, if I did not get my way, I would hold my breath and make myself pass out. So I think it's probably innate, and I've been this way my whole life, because and they would say, don't make her mad. Not that I'm used to getting my way now, but I will forge through until I get what I want, and I do think it's, being raised intentionally and seeing, how hard my parents worked and just overcoming obstacles. But I think that, your DNA is also a big factor in everything. Like when I was an associate, I always treated that practice like it was my own practice. And I hear that most associates don't do that. And I was always having, ideas for the owner, let's do this, and just going above and beyond. And I think that it's the work ethic that I've seen and I grew up with. And I feel like a lot of it's innate, and it comes down to the competitive nature in me, and not competitive with everyone else, but I'm competitive, within myself. Mm-hmm. So when I set goals, like, I'm going to get it done. And my husband knows that. Like, he knows, he's like, if you said you wanted to become the next president, he's like, I'd be like, okay, like, we got to figure this out, because I know you're going to do it. So I just always, just push until I am so goal oriented that I want to accomplish the goals. And if I write it down and that's a goal, I'm going to do it. So
go ahead and describe your practice for us. Like, what's the focus of it? What do patients experience when they walk through your doors?
Well, I feel like there's a big shift in dentistry in these boutique, concierge type style practices, which that's kind of where I'm going. I came from a practice that was so busy. I could see 3 of my own clinical columns and 3 or 4 hygiene checks an hour. And you really, I miss the aspect of just like building those relationships with patients. That's honestly one of the things I love about ortho. So the first couple of years when I was an associate, I would work like 7 hours, and then I would go to the ortho office after, and then the next day I would start at the ortho office and then go to the dental office. And I always thought of ortho, I'm like, oh, it's such a vacation. Like, it's a dream. I literally walk, sit down, chat with patients, and then the assistants, do whatever we told them to do. And then you move to the next chair. It's just like chatting all day and getting to know patients. And that's one of the things I love about ortho, is that, I'm not drilling in patients' mouth. Like, I can actually have conversations with them and take my time and get to know all of my patients. So I really love that aspect, and I really wanted it to be more quality over quantity. And so that's, and a lot of laughing, and my patients always joke about about my heels clicking down the hall. So that's part of the experience. You're going to hear the taps of my heels clicking down the hall, and they always know that I'm coming, and just fun, but really quality dentistry and building relationships. And I feel like, probably most dentists say that, but that's the experience we want to have. And like, checking on them after hours and just really going above and beyond.
Oh, I love that. You were one of our doctor guests at the Making of Dinner in, again, 2019. And this was at Voices of Dentistry, that was a fun conference. But the Making of group is with Michael Arias and Dr. Ashley Hovez, and then Studio 88 sponsored the dinner. But you and I sat across from each other and had the most intriguing conversation just surrounding your passion and expertise for airway health, myofunctional therapy in children. And I was very captivated by it, because all of that for me was newer. And I, was just really learning about all of it, and just kind of like first exposure. So I could have talked to you forever, for sure, that night. And one of my favorite things was just this spark came alive in you. And I love that so much, when you're talking with someone and then all of a sudden they hone in on their true passion. And so that was amazing to kind of, have that conversation with you and see your eyes light up. Tell us what myofunctional therapy is and why you're so passionate about using this philosophy of treatment with your patients and with kiddos.
Well, I really believe in whole body wellness. I wouldn't label myself as like a holistic dentist, but I do think that if you can change more than just someone's smile, especially kids. I mean, we do all the way through adults with myofunctional therapy, from infants to, adulthood. But I feel like if you can do whole body wellness, and you can increase the longevity of life for patients, increase kiddos' IQ, improve people's sleep, just have a better quality life, then why wouldn't you? And myofunction, a lot of that starts with infancy and creating good sleep habits and things like that. And I really learned from the orthodontist that I worked for 17 years that it's so important to, address the root cause of issues as opposed to putting a Band-Aid on it. And there's so many people, and I feel like in the United States, just in general, we're very medicinally driven. We are very reactive to health. And I think that's just a bad way to look at the medical field. If we can prevent something from happening, which they do in a lot of other countries, why wouldn't we? And I feel like straightening teeth is really pretty easy. But if you can impact someone's life, especially kiddos, then that's amazing. Like, you really are, as a dentist, putting, changing people's lives and improving things. So that's kind of where my drive comes from, is just addressing root causes of problems and being proactive with people's health, and not just changing teeth. I mean, airway is so important. They're linking it to, airway, linking it to heart attack and stroke and Alzheimer's, like all kinds of things that you don't even think about are related to the teeth, really are. So if we can just start, patients off on the right foot from the get-go and get their facial development back on track and unlock their genetic potential. I mean, that's powerful.
Wow. What type of orthodontist should parents be looking for? As far as, because there's so many that are not trained in myofunction or airway health. And so that's always been a question some of my friends have started to ask me. And I know that in our area, there are not a lot that have that type of skill or expertise. And so what should parents be looking for? Who are the qualified orthodontists when it comes to, more of the holistic approach?
I mean, there are orthodontists out there, but I feel like honestly, dentists are the ones bridging that gap right now. I think it's the more dentists they're the ones that are having this, paradigm shift and really researching it in dentistry as opposed to orthodontics. Because I feel like a lot of orthodontists get out of residency and they're, doing what they were trained to do, and they weren't really trained on myofunction. So a lot of my colleagues that I, converse with and reach out to and share cases with, most of them are dentists. I hope that changes, and I hope that they, start incorporating myofunction into orthodontic residencies. And there's a change trying to happen right now with the American Association of Orthodontists and trying to incorporate this. But right now, I feel like it's a lot of dentists doing this. And it doesn't necessarily always have to involve orthodontics. And I think that's why there's a lot of orthodontists not doing this, because, about 90% of my kiddos that start with myofunction, like 8 or under, most of them, over 90%, don't end up needing full braces. Like we're getting their, overbite, overjet. We're just allowing those teeth to come into where they should, because we're correcting the soft tissue dysfunction that's causing the malocclusion and the crowded teeth to begin with. So that could be why there's, do orthodontists or whomever want to prevent people from needing to go into braces? I don't know. I mean, I couldn't answer that, but if I can prevent that and open up their airway, they're sick less, their IQs improve. A lot of them get off of ADHD meds. Like there's so many benefits besides not having to have full braces that I don't know. So that I think a lot of dentists are doing that because they're not having to go into orthodontics if they're really well trained in myofunction. So, I mean, we're treating the root cause of the malocclusion and the crowding and whatever the case may be, because we're correcting soft tissue dysfunction, which is usually tongue, lips, cheeks. And that's why, we're getting this, we're getting facial development off track is usually soft tissue dysfunction.
Well, I mean, logically, that makes a lot of sense, because that would be messing with, an ortho like patient treatment plan. I mean, big time. If you take the braces and all of that out of there, I mean, even just financially, the cost just went way down. So yeah, that's really interesting.
And I do a lot of expansion, and we do, braces, Invisalign. So it's not everyone has soft tissue dysfunction, and but a lot of them do. And if you can avoid having braces on teeth, most people are happy about that. So
yeah, I would agree. You talk about breastfeeding issues on your website, and I found one paragraph super interesting. Both of my kids had major issues latching on when I was nursing them when they were babies. Mm-hmm. And when I read this, it just confirms that I wish I had this type of knowledge when I was, whatever, my son's 15. So 15 years ago, it would have made all the difference. I just wanted to read this for our audience. If you are breastfeeding and frustrated because your baby has trouble latching on, the cause may be a frenulum. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. That is too short or tight. There are 2 frenula. One is located under the tongue and one under the upper lip. If either is restricting movement, Dr. Baller performs a simple procedure called a frenectomy to correct it. So do you have a lot of, moms with babies coming in to have that corrected? Do you see a lot of that?
Yeah, it's becoming more and more prevalent, especially with the babies latching on and the tongue tie underneath. And it does wonders for their facial development, not just, the nursing and things like that, but especially it's patients are always like, oh my gosh, how did you know this about me? I'll say, well, were they preemie? Are they snoring at night? Like, just all, did they have a finger habit? And they're like, how do you know? You barely even looked in the mouth yet. And I can spot like a tongue tie a mile away, just because I, see so many of them and I know how it makes their face develop. But, especially like colicky babies, I think those moms are the most appreciative because, the babies are tongue tied. So they're incorporating more air and gas when they're eating and, drinking. Because they don't have that nice peristaltic motion because their tongue is tied down. And, so many moms are like, oh my gosh, the colic went away. They're not screaming all day. And of course, breastfeeding moms are super happy too, when like right after we do the little laser procedure, they're nursing flawlessly right after. So, yeah, I think that, people are becoming more and more astute to, tongue ties and lip ties and, all kinds of stuff like that. And, you see people, kiddos with, I'll see like their whole facial, they have like a whole face shift because they had like a finger habit. And, when you have your tongue in your palate like it should, you're stimulating all those happy hormones. And so when their tongue is tied down, kids are using other modalities to kind of get that happy hormone. So if we release the tongue, the tongue's like the natural expander in the mouth, and your lips and cheeks are like the braces, if you want to think about it like that. I explain that to my patients. So the tongue needs to live in your palate and it expands. The tongue exerts about 500 grams of pressure. How many grams of pressure do you think it takes to move a single tooth? Just guess.
Oh, okay. Well, considering I never went to any type of dental school, I don't know.
We don't even learn this in dental schools. The crazy to me, but it only takes 2 grams of pressure to move a tooth. And if your tongue is pushing with 500 grams of pressure, your teeth just don't stand a chance, right?
Yeah.
So if your tongue is pushing in the wrong position, your teeth develop wrong, your jaws develop wrong. If you're a mouth breather, you don't have that seal, which is, kind of pushing the teeth where they need to go. So that's kind of the soft tissue dysfunction. But
so our tongues are strong.
Our tongues are very strong, especially compared to moving the teeth. So, yeah.
Well, my daughter, all 4 of us are in treatment plans, and we fly out of state to go to see a dentist who similar to you does a lot of ortho and has done tons of training and is just really an amazing person. And we discovered that she has tongue tie, and she's also a mouth breather, which I just wasn't cognizant of checking on that kind of stuff. Both my kids have autoimmune stuff too as well. And it's just really interesting to discover this stuff about your kids. And, my son's an Invisalign, my daughter Aaliyah she now has like an appliance she wears at night, and she's learning to, touch. There's a little piece on there where she's supposed to touch the top of it to train her tongue to go to the roof of the mouth.
Yep.
And it also forces her mouth to close when she's sleeping, so she's breathing in through her nose, out through her, all nose, no mouth, no mouth breathing, right? So yeah, I don't know. That's been quite a journey for all of us. It's definitely been a time commitment thing, but we're all sleeping better and we're committed. We've talked with enough people now, and we have the benefit of knowing people like you and others who are such educators. And when you have enough of these conversations, and there's so many direct correlations to so many major symptoms and disease, and you just have to stop and look at it and go, hey, I've got, whether it's sleep apnea or something else, I've got to get rid of this insomnia in my life.
Yep. I mean, it's also so amazing to prevent these issues, especially when you start young. Like if we can prevent sleep apnea, which we know takes a good percentage off of people's lives, um, less likely to have a heart attack, and because you're breathing properly, and you know kiddos that mouth breathe can get up to 40% less oxygen
Mm.
um, when they're breathing through their mouth as opposed to breathing through their nose. And what is the number one nutrient for the brain? Oxygen.
Mhm.
So I mean, you tell a parent that, and that's compelling. I mean, do you want your kids to have up to 40% less oxygen? And that's why when you get train these kiddos mouths and tongues and cheeks to breathe properly, it could increase their IQ. I mean, there's a lot of kiddos diagnosed with ADHD, and then they get a stimulant like Adderall, and that just impacts their sleep even more, when really
Mhm.
the cause of them bouncing off the walls is because it's their sleep. It's sleep, called sleep disturbed breathing. So um,
Wow.
it's very interesting. And some pediatricians I've talked to are just like, a light bulb went off, and some of them are like, what? So we have a long way to go, but I feel like it's exciting because more and more people are becoming aware and are looking for those types of things. So
Well,
it's powerful, and it's so powerful that you don't even know, because it's preventing so many things that could have happened, but you're doing the right things now. So hopefully that they live longer and happier and healthier.
awesome. There is definitely an airway health movement happening in the United States,
For
and
sure.
dentists and docs are all speaking up and really educating all of us. And I'm so glad you're on that team. So thank you for what you're
Yes.
doing. So I want to segue for a few minutes and just talk about real life, the fact that you're a busy mom of 3 boys and also a busy, successful orthodontist and dentist. What are your boys' ages?
3, 5, and 11.
Oh, wow. I
Yeah.
think I forgot that you had one so young as 3.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I had one my last year in dental school, and then one 15 months later, kind of an oopsie. And so I was 5 months postpartum, and I was like, oh my gosh. I told my husband, I feel like I might be pregnant. He's like, no, the doctor said it's like impossible. Well, surprise, another boy. But yeah, so we're busy. We're in the thick of it.
You
Yeah.
are.
Yes.
What do you love most, or maybe one, or, about being, what do you love most about being a boy mom?
I never envisioned myself, either did anyone that know me, because I'm the girliest girl on the planet. And no one even thought that I would even have boys. I don't know, because they just probably couldn't see me with any boys. But I honestly really love it, because I'm kind of the princess in the house. And I am girly, but I'm also, competitive. I'm like the biggest sports mom out there, always the loudest. And it's super, super fun. And they're just as energetic as me. So we're just always going, 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 going. But I've grown to love being a boy mom. So
Oh, that's so sweet.
hopefully one of them can be a dentist.
Yeah.
I always tell them that.
Yeah, definitely. They'd have the best coach, right?
Right? Exactly.
Yeah. Often as women, we find ourselves torn between, the 2 paradigms. We wear so many roles, so many hats. And I know that I'm often, find myself torn between, oh, I'm spending too much time. Usually it's on work, or, oh, I'm spending too much time at home. And it's difficult, to find that agreeable balance.
Yeah.
But instead of talking about how balance is challenging, I kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on why doing what you love, pursuing your passion, actually makes you a better mother and human to your family.
I like most women working and female dentists, I think mom guilt is real. Like probably have a moment of mom guilt every day. But my 11-year-old now, he'll write like, a Mother's Day, like he wrote this big, long Mother's Day poem. And it really reminds me, because anytime he writes something, like something at school or a story, and it has to do with his family, he always will say, my mom works so hard. It gets me choked up, but that's what I'm teaching him, hard work. And I'm also teaching him that women can be hard workers, and he'll never be one of those old men saying that women can't do something. So, but it just makes it all worthwhile when that they see it. And I think that when I said earlier, raised with intention, and, they know they have no other option, but they're going to work hard, and that girls can work just as hard as guys, and they don't have this stereotypical environment. And they'll be one of those guys that are super supportive of their wives, just like my husband is. Because without my husband being supportive, there's just no way that I could do this. I mean, my husband takes kids to 3 different schools every day, and picks them up, from 3 different schools, and transfers one midday to a different school. So, without him, my mom guilt would be through the roof. But it's, now that my son's getting older, and that I really know that he knows how hard I work and why I work so hard. And that makes it super rewarding, because, they understand. When they're young, you don't think that they know what's going on, but as now that I have an 11-year-old, I know that he knows, and he appreciates, and he's proud of me. So that makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah. Do you find that living in your lane, pursuing the thing that lights your heart on fire, that spark, does that really open up more opportunities to have, great conversations with your kids regarding their future and what they want to do with their lives and pursuing their passion?
Oh, 100%. Teaching them that they can do whatever they want to do, regardless of how, hard that road is. And I feel like, as hard as what I'm going through now with everything, they're going to see that there's, resilience, and you have to fight for what you want. And if you're passionate about something and you care enough about something, and hopefully, because my passion revolves around helping other people. And if that's instilled in them, that, be passionate about helping others, because if you don't have that, in my opinion, you don't have anything. And I hope that they learn that, like, not only passion for what you want to do, but passion for really giving back and helping other people. And the last thing that my son wrote is about how much we give back to other people. And so he sees that, and it's really cool to see him come into his own and really appreciate the hard work and passion. And not just that, but you really have to help people and be giving. So that's important.
It's so encouraging when our kids on occasion show us this side of them that actually has EQ, and you're like, oh, oh, this is amazing.
Yes, exactly. You're like, I am doing something right.
Yeah. Oh, well, wow. This has been such a great conversation. Last words, what would you say to all the people, dentists, specialists listening, who are not fully experiencing joy in what they're currently doing professionally? Any words of wisdom?
I feel like lately I hear from dentists on blogs and all this, like, a lot of dentists don't really love what they do, but there's so many aspects to dentistry. You could really find what you love to do. And, sleep dentistry, airway dentistry, orthodontics is so rewarding, and it's not as physically demanding. And I just think that there's so many aspects, like, you can find what you love in dentistry. And I think people are afraid to really have a niche in dentistry, or they're afraid to have a niche, like, oh, I have to go specialize. Or you don't. If you really are super passionate about it, just find what you love and do it. I always say there's a will, there's a way. And if especially a lot of dentists are like, it's so physically demanding, mentally demanding. Find what things in dentistry that aren't as physically or mentally demanding for you. And there's so many shifts in dentistry now that there's so many things that you can find that you love to do. And I just say, go for it.
I love that. Well, if you're listening or watching, those were very wise words from Dr. Holly Baller. So you should take those into account for sure. Dr. Baller, I cannot thank you enough for just being my guest on the 5th episode.
Yes,
We've only done a few
so
of these.
excited. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I really enjoyed our conversation. If people want to follow you and stay in touch, what's the best place on social to do that?
You know, that's where I'm really bad, but it's on my goal list to get better at. Baller, Dental, and Ortho, I think are my handles for social media. And I'm going to start posting more things now that things are slowing down a little bit. So
that's awesome. Well, listen, we are cheering you on big time. And I don't know, I think I do. I think the sky's the limit for the future of your practice. And I'm proud of you. I don't even have the right to be, but I am. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm excited. And I think things are going to turn out the way they should be. And I'm super excited about the practice, even though the timing isn't the best, but it's all going to work out.
That's awesome. Well, thank you to our audience and everybody who is listening or watching today. And of course, to Dr. Baller for hanging out with us. We will see you next time. That is a wrap.